Heaven's Gate, a tragic journey to the stars. The story of Heaven's Gate begins in the 1970s, a time when the United States was fertile ground for new religious movements, countercultural experiments, and a collective fascination with the mysteries of outer space. Amid this backdrop, two seemingly ordinary individuals, Marshall Herff Applewhite and Bonnie Lou Nettles, would create a movement that combined millenarian beliefs, extraterrestrial theology, and rigid asceticism. Their vision of salvation, however, would end in one of the most infamous mass suicides in modern history: the origins of Heaven's Gate. Marshall Applewhite, the son of a Presbyterian minister, spent much of his early life searching for meaning. A talented musician and charismatic speaker, Applewhite struggled with his identity, grappling with societal expectations and personal conflicts over his sexuality. These struggles contributed to a series of professional and personal failures, leaving him adrift by the early 1970s. It was during this turbulent time that Applewhite crossed paths with Bonnie Nettles, a nurse with a deep interest in mysticism, astrology, and the occult. Their meeting in 1972 marked the beginning of an intense, almost cosmic bond. Nettles, who believed their connection was preordained by celestial forces, introduced Applewhite to esoteric spiritual concepts. Together, they embarked on a journey of discovery, convinced they had a divine mission to fulfill. Applewhite and Nettles developed a theology rooted in Christian eschatology, but heavily influenced by the burgeoning fascination with UFOs and extraterrestrial life. They came to believe that they were the two prophesied witnesses from the Book of Revelation, tasked with guiding a select group of souls to a higher plane of existence. They taught that Earth was on the brink of destruction and that salvation lay in leaving behind one's human vehicle, a term they used to describe the body. By the mid-1970s, the pair began recruiting followers for what would later become known as Heaven's Gate. Traveling across the country, they held public meetings, sharing their message of spiritual ascension and life beyond the stars. Their teachings resonated with a small but devoted group of seekers who were disillusioned with mainstream religion and searching for deeper meaning. Life within the group. As Heaven's Gate evolved, so did its teachings and practices. The group believed that to prepare for ascension, they needed to purge themselves of earthly attachments, desires, and individual identities. This required adopting a highly disciplined lifestyle, governed by strict rules that shaped every aspect of their daily lives, eradicating individuality. One of the most striking features of Heaven's Gate was its focus on uniformity. Members were encouraged to reject their personal identities, cutting ties with family, friends, and any aspects of their former lives. They adopted new names, each ending in -ODY, e.g., Orlodi, Ginity, which symbolized their status as students in a cosmic classroom. Their physical appearance was similarly regulated. Members dressed in plain, unassuming clothing, often loose-fitting and gender-neutral, to minimize individuality. They even adopted matching hairstyles, with men and women wearing short, cropped cuts. Sexuality was viewed as a dangerous distraction. Applewhite, who saw his own struggles with sexual desire as a barrier to spiritual progress, instituted a strict ban on sexual activity. To reinforce this, several male members, including Applewhite himself, underwent voluntary castration, a shocking demonstration of their commitment to the group's teachings. Daily routines. Daily life within Heaven's Gate revolved around meticulous routines. Members followed a strict schedule that balanced work, study, and prayer. Meals were simple and often monotonous, chosen for their perceived spiritual purity rather than flavor or enjoyment. Communication was formal and carefully controlled, as idle chatter was seen as a waste of energy. Work was a necessity, both as a means of financial survival and as an opportunity to serve the group's mission. In the 1990s, Heaven's Gate became known for its web design services. Operating under the name Higher Source, they built websites for small businesses, gaining a reputation for professionalism and quality. This paradoxical embrace of technology, while rejecting much of modern society, was justified as a practical necessity for their mission. The approach of Hale-Bopp. By the mid-1990s, Applewhite's teachings had grown increasingly apocalyptic. He warned that Earth was on the verge of a catastrophic recycling process, a cosmic cleansing that would destroy all life. Only those who followed his guidance would be spared, ascending to the next level aboard a spaceship waiting to rescue them. In 1997, the Hale-Bopp comet captured global attention. For Applewhite, this celestial event was more than a natural phenomenon. It was the long-awaited sign that the time for ascension had arrived. He proclaimed that a spacecraft, hidden in the comet's wake, was the vehicle that would transport their souls to salvation. Applewhite framed this as a final opportunity. The only way to board the spaceship was to shed their earthly containers. This meant death, an act he described not as an end, but as a necessary transformation. His followers, deeply entrenched in his teachings, embraced this vision with unwavering faith. Preparations for departure. In the months leading up to their exit, Heaven's Gate began preparing for their final act. They purchased matching black outfits and Nike sneakers, chosen for their simplicity and uniformity. Each member carried a small amount of cash, $5.75, symbolizing a fare for their cosmic journey. The group meticulously planned their deaths. They recorded farewell videos, smiling and expressing gratitude for the chance to ascend. These recordings, later discovered by investigators, showed no signs of hesitation or fear. For them, this was not a tragedy, but a joyous graduation to the next level. The preparations for Heaven's Gate's departure were as meticulous and methodical as their day-to-day life had been. The group's rented mansion in Rancho Santa Fe, California, became a sacred ground for their final act, symbolizing their transition from the physical to the spiritual realm. Their leader, Marshall Applewhite, who referred to himself as Dew, orchestrated every detail with precision, ensuring that the process reflected their collective discipline and unity. Physical preparations. Months before their exit, members began acquiring the items necessary for the ritual. Their black uniforms bore patches reading Heaven's Gate Away Team, likening their mission to that of a crew in a science fiction narrative, such as Star Trek. They purchased identical Nike Decade sneakers, a choice that would later become infamous as a symbol of the event. The sneakers were chosen, Applewhite explained, because they were inexpensive and practical, qualities that matched the group's ascetic ethos. They also obtained sufficient quantities of phenobarbital, a barbiturate that would serve as the primary agent of their demise. Applewhite had convinced his followers that this method would ensure a painless departure from their earthly vehicles. The drug was mixed with applesauce and vodka, making it easier to consume. Plastic bags were prepared to be placed over their heads after ingestion to ensure suffocation in the event that the barbiturate did not take full effect. Emotional and spiritual preparations. In the days leading up to the event, the members recorded video testimonies. These farewell messages were filled with smiles and expressions of excitement, reflecting their belief that death was not the end, but a beginning. Some spoke directly to their families, thanking them for their love and explaining that this decision was the fulfillment of their life's purpose. Their demeanor was calm, even joyful, further illustrating the depth of their faith in Applewhite and their shared doctrine. Applewhite himself delivered a final impassioned video address, reiterating that the Hale-Bopp comet's arrival was the definitive sign they had been waiting for. He framed their impending deaths as a heroic act, describing it as a graduation from the limitations of earthly existence. He emphasized that their choice to leave was voluntary and marked by clarity of purpose. The final exit, March 26, 1997. The ritual took place over 3 days in the group's rented mansion in Rancho Santa Fe, California. The process was methodical and eerily organized. Day first and second small groups of members took turns completing the ritual. Each consumed a lethal mixture of phenobarbital, applesauce, and vodka, designed to induce unconsciousness and then death. After ingesting the poison, they lay down on bunk beds, carefully covering themselves with purple shrouds. The remaining members ensured that each body was arranged with care, adjusting the shrouds and removing any visible signs of struggle. Day 3rd, by March 26th, the ritual was complete. Marshall Applewhite was among the last to take the poison. His body, like those of his followers, was found neatly arranged, wearing the group's uniform and holding the small symbolic fare. In total, 39 people, 21 women and 18 men, ranging in age from 26 to 72, were discovered dead. The group carried out their ritual over 3 days, dividing into smaller groups to complete the process in shifts. This methodical approach ensured that those who remained could oversee and assist the transition of their fellow members. The scene, as investigators would later discover, was one of eerie calm and almost surgical precision. Day 1st, the beginning. The first group of approximately 15 members prepared themselves for their exit. They consumed the lethal mixture, lay down on prepared bunk beds, and covered themselves with purple shrouds. The remaining members, acting as caretakers, checked each body for signs of life, adjusted the shrouds, and ensured that the deceased appeared serene. Each person carried $5.75 in their pockets, a symbolic fare meant to reflect the toll needed for their interstellar journey. The legacy of Heaven's Gate endures as one of the most extreme examples of a new religious movement gone tragically awry. In the years following the mass suicide, scholars, journalists, and the public have sought to understand what drove the group to such a fate. Cultural reflection. Heaven's Gate has become a symbol of the dangers of cultic influence and the power of charismatic leadership. Applewhite's ability to instill absolute faith in his followers has been the subject of extensive analysis, as has the psychological vulnerability of those who joined the group. Many were intelligent educated individuals seeking meaning in a confusing and often alienating world, making their fate all the more haunting. Ongoing presence. A small number of former members who left the group before the suicide continue to maintain Heaven's Gate's online presence. The group's website, which remains active to this day, is an unaltered relic of their teachings, offering a window into their beliefs and values. Its stark design and eerie content stand as a digital tombstone for the lives lost. Academic and media attention. The story of Heaven's Gate has been the subject of numerous documentaries, books, and academic studies. Researchers have explored the intersection of apocalyptic belief systems, isolation, and the human yearning for transcendence. The group's use of technology, particularly their embrace of the internet, has also been examined as a precursor to how digital tools can amplify fringe ideologies. Stolz's A Cautionary Tale. For many, Heaven's Gate is a sobering reminder of the dangers of unchecked belief systems. It highlights the vulnerabilities of individuals searching for purpose and the risks posed by leaders who exploit those desires. Their story serves as both a tragic testament to human faith and a warning of the devastating consequences that can arise when that faith becomes absolute. Even now, Heaven's Gate remains a source of fascination and horror, a poignant example of how the quest for meaning can lead to both enlightenment and destruction. Day second, continuing the process. The next wave of participants followed the same procedure. The caretakers, who had become proficient in the ritual, repeated the steps with unwavering focus. The process was slow and deliberate, creating a sense of ritualistic reverence. Despite the grim nature of the act, there were no signs of panic or hesitation, as the members truly believed they were fulfilling their destiny. Day third, the leader's turn. By the third day, only Applewhite and a handful of loyal followers remained. Having supervised the departure of the others, Applewhite took his place among them. His body was later found lying in the same precise arrangement as his followers, wearing the same uniform and shoes. With his death, the ritual was complete. When police discovered the scene on March 26th, it was unlike anything they had encountered before. The bodies, neatly aligned and draped, reflected a surreal sense of order. The mansion, filled with farewell messages and instructions for investigators, seemed frozen in time, a monument to the group's unwavering faith. Impact on families. For the families of the deceased, the tragedy was devastating. Many had lost touch with their loved ones years earlier, as members were encouraged to sever ties with their earthly connections. The farewell messages left behind offered some solace, but also deepened the pain of those left behind, as they grappled with the knowledge that their loved ones had willingly embraced such an extreme act. Aftermath. The discovery of the bodies shocked the world. News outlets broadcast images of the eerily organized scene. Rows of bodies dressed identically, purple shrouds draped over their lifeless forms, and detailed instructions left for authorities. The group's website, still maintained today by surviving former members, provided a chilling insight into their beliefs. For many, the tragedy of Heaven's Gate raised uncomfortable questions about the power of charismatic leadership, the vulnerability of the human spirit, and the lengths people will go to in search of meaning. The mass suicide of Heaven's Gate members sent shockwaves through the world. Media outlets broadcast harrowing images of the crime scene, drawing attention to the bizarre details, the matching uniforms, the shrouds, and the orderly placement of the bodies. The story dominated headlines, prompting widespread fascination and horror. Investigative findings: investigators uncovered detailed instructions left behind by the group, explaining the purpose of their actions and the significance of their beliefs. The notes were accompanied by videos and written materials that offered a chilling insight into their mindset. The methodical nature of the ritual and the absence of coercion suggested that the participants had acted voluntarily, driven by a shared vision of spiritual ascension. Forensic examinations confirmed that the deaths were a result of phenobarbital poisoning, with the plastic bags ensuring suffocation. The precise execution of the ritual, down to the smallest detail, left little doubt that the group had meticulously planned their exit for months. Impact on families. For the families of the deceased, the tragedy was devastating. Many had lost touch with their loved ones years earlier, as members were encouraged to sever ties with their earthly connections. The farewell messages left behind offered some solace, but also deepened the pain of those left behind, as they grappled with the knowledge that their loved ones had willingly embraced such an extreme act. Legacy. In the years since the mass suicide, Heaven's Gate has become a subject of fascination and study. Documentaries, books, and academic analyses have explored the group's teachings, the psychology of its members, and the societal factors that allowed it to thrive. Their story remains a cautionary tale about the dangers of isolation, unwavering faith, and the seductive allure of transcendence. To this day, the Heaven's Gate website serves as a haunting reminder of their beliefs and the tragic cost of their devotion. Their legacy endures as a stark warning about the potential consequences of extreme belief systems and the human desire to seek something greater than ourselves, even at the ultimate price.